Thank you so much, Tanya.
You're most welcome. Okay, so take it on.
Okie dokes. Hey everyone, my name is Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and I'm delighted to be here today. When I normally introduce myself to people, I say I work in futures and predictive services. And so I think, I give the impression that I'm a futures trader or something. But when people cotton on to the fact that I'm an astrologer and hypnotherapeutic coach, I'm usually met with two basic responses. So the first response is, well, I believe in science. And the second response I get from people is, great, can you guess what star sign I am? And what I notice is there's not much neutrality about the idea of astrology. People either really, really like it or they really don't seem to like it at all. In fact, have absolutely zero respect for it. So when I was asked to participate at the Higher Self Expo, and when I found out that the theme was where science meets spirituality, I was super excited because I thought now is my moment to get to explore the science and spirituality of astrology publicly, and to talk about some of the difficulties around astrology and its reputation. And so I just want to sort of clear it up, really. I'm hoping to explore this over 45 minutes. I've got quite a few things that I'm going to be covering. So I'm a little ambitious, and, I've got one thing at the end that I may not add in if I don't have enough time. But the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to have a look, first of all, a really brief look at the history of astrology and how it came about, because believe it or not, it was actually one of the first sciences, one of the first studies that mankind really did. And then that's going to lead on to the three main criticisms of astrology. And I'm going to explore that in such a way that we can ask ourselves at the end of it, do those criticisms actually matter? Okay. And then I'm going to talk about the practical applications of astrology. So how I use it in my own practice and how it can be of help to people. And whilst doing that, I'm going to talk about how we have correlations, because I want to, I don't want to make anybody's mind up for them, but I really want to share some of the wealth of experience that other astrologers over the millennia have come up with that really give us some great evidence and great pointers into how we can use the cosmic coding of the planets to manage our lives and manage them really, really well. And then if we've got time at the end, I'm going to lead you into a guided planetary meditation. I guess that's the spiritual component of it. And the spiritual component of the astrology really will lead in throughout the whole presentation. So before I talk about the history of astrology, I just want to pose the question: is there a time in your life, in like, if you think about your year, is there a time every year when you're really, really busy with anniversaries, celebrations, lots of friends' birthdays and parties and things like that? Or is there a time of the year when traditionally things just happen to you, like you get a bit of an upgrade, like you always seem to move house or get a new job at this particular time of year? Just let that sit with you, and at the end I'm going to revisit that question and just see what comes up. If you want to send a question, by the way, I'm sure Tanya will be very happy to put any comments in. I'm really happy to answer things as I go. So anyway, the history of astrology is a vast subject, really, really vast, and it spans right the way back to Sumerian times, and possibly even before that, before it was even recorded. So what I want to do is just quickly look at that on my video. So Tanya, if you would please bring up the connection with the world has always been an endless curiosity. It's why man's connection with the world has always been an endless curiosity. It's why when toddlers learn to talk, some of their first words after mom, dad, and no, it's sun, moon, stars. It's a fascination that appears ingrained in our DNA. And so the first science was simply the study of the world and the cosmos, and it might have started by the observation of things that cycle and repeat. The sun appearing to rise every day and appearing to set every evening. The moon coming up every evening. the waxing moon that grows bigger up to full moon, and the waning moon that shrinks back to the nothingness of the new moon. And then came the observance of the fixed stars and their constellations, the backdrop to our magnificent night skies. The patterns and positions of the stars forming shapes which were given constellation names, which developed into myths, which developed into our own hero's journey from Aries right the way through to Pisces. As this early science developed, the ancients noticed the movement of the moon through the constellations every couple of days. And man noticed that when the moon was in the constellation of Scorpius, which we now know as Scorpio, the tensions would be a bit higher, a bit more fraught than they might have been when the moon was moving in front of the constellation of Taurus. And so the backdrop of the constellations became our reference point to be able to first of all map out the position of the moon, and then the sun, and then later Venus and Mars, and then the other planets that were known about during those times. The ancients noticed that the moon would take approximately 28 days to come back around to the beginning, and it appeared that the sun took 365.25 days to come all the way back to the starting point. And after centuries of observation, people began to know what it meant when there was a full moon, a new moon, a solstice, equinox, or eclipse, that there was a different energy or resonance. And we ask ourselves, could these energetic potentials be tapped into? Or could they be used as a marker in the planning of their day-to-day agricultural lives? Of course, we don't connect to the stars in quite the same way as our ancestors did, because we have lots of light pollution and trails in the sky that obscure the primal connection that we might have had. But our ancestors definitely felt this. So this is all taking place simultaneously in many civilizations. The Sumerians around 3 to 4000 BC, to the Mesopotamians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, through the Dark Ages to medieval times, to the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Age of Reason, leading right up to the Industrial Revolution. Each civilization and epoch and age adding more to the knowledge base. And many of the greats, the philosophers, artists and thinkers that we know of were also astrologers. The astrology informed all of their studies. They were blended. These were the special advisors to the church and kingdoms. As time passed, this knowledge came out of the hands of the learned, and with the invention of the printing press in Germany in the 15th century, the accessibility of astrology got into the hands of the commoners, the everyday person. With the threat of people having the ability to plan their own futures and live their own lives, there was an inevitable backlash with organised religion, mainly Catholicism and Christianity. The church began to teach that astrology is a refusal to acknowledge God and his sovereignty. Without access to our own future, we're reliant on God alone. Thank you, Tanya. Can I come back in? Thank you. So that gives you a potted version, a really quick, down and dirty potted version of how astrology came to be. And up until the point when the church really started to get involved, and also with the resurgence or the popularity of modern day scientific ideas. Up until that point, astrology and astronomy were the same thing. It was actually at that time known as astrologia. But following the discomfort that the powers that be had towards the fact that the people could actually start learning and start using those guides, there was a split, a very, very palpable split. And so the philosophy or the whole movement of astrology was split into two. So astronomy got known as the science. It was known as the thing that had the good reputation. It was the thing that was taught in universities. And at that point, astrology was removed. It was removed from sight. It was hidden. Now, if there's an astrologer out there, I'd love to know if they'd ever been told that they do the devil's work, because that's something I have heard from very sort of fundamental people, people who have a very strong belief about what religion, about what astrology is from their position of faith. And it's a weird one. It appears that there's a certain amount of censorship that's gone on to ensure that the power stays with the people that might want to wield it. But I'd like to know where that knowledge went. Apparently, the Vatican Library is full of astrological texts, and any astrologer out there that follows the astrology of current events, like when there are big announcements, for instance, announcements about certain health-related pandemias, the dates that they're released on, those public notices always fall on very powerful astrological days. So I'm pretty sure that those people still use it, and it's done in secret. Now, earlier this year, I was in contact with somebody from a religious, spiritual freedom group, a group that is, works quite secretly to reveal hidden truths. And I actually said to her, I said, you know what, I like to gift astrology, and I'd love to do some free work with you. If ever you need an astrologer to time the launch of some of your events, please just let me know. And what she said was, I'm going to decline. And I'm declining because we actually have 6 in-house astrologers. So, this religious spiritual freedom group that works behind the scenes, very much in secret, has 6 full-time astrologers. Now, I believe there are astrologers all over the world that work for royal families, that work for top-end banks, that work in the governments, and they're not known about. They're not astrologers that you'll find on the internet. They don't have a presence of fame, but they have a certain cachet. They have a certain knowledge that possibly was removed from public consumption. So anyway, let's move on a little bit more. So we've had a look at the history of astrology, and obviously about the split that occurred in roughly the 17th century. And obviously there's loads and loads of information about the history of astrology. This was the book that I started learning with about 20 years ago. There's so many great blogs and people that have really researched it. So, please do look it up if it's something of interest to you. So what I'd like to move on to now, and I want to get my notes because there's so much to cover. What I'd like to have a look at now is the criticisms of astrology. So I want to know, when was the first time you heard about astrology, and what did you hear about it? Because my first encounter with astrology was when my mum told me that I had 2 birth signs. She said I was born on the cusp, and I had no idea what that was. I was only 6, but she said I was very special because I had 2 signs. And of course, what 6-year-old is going to have a problem with that? I was very excited, and so I wanted to learn everything I could about the idea that your personality could somehow have some guidance around it. That there was some kind of work or user's manual for me. That really excited me. No doubt, the first time you came to hear about astrology, you too heard about astrology from the idea of horoscopes. So what really strikes me about this is a lot of people discount astrology when they hear about horoscopes, because they think, the idea that 1/12 of the population is a certain way just seems a bit bonkers. And even I question that. I think that's not very good. In fact, in my teens, when I was thinking about me as a Sagittarian, I was thinking that really doesn't touch on the sensitivity that really underpins me. So, I was kind of getting ready to throw it out. But it really reminds me of this lemon, and I wanted to use something very natural, considering that I was just following Helder, and he'll be very pleased to know that this has just come out fresh from the garden. But if you look at this lemon and you take it at face value, you'll just think it's a load of peel, and you might not want to delve any deeper because it just looks like peel, and you're going to think you're going to get more of it. But if you actually cut it open, a lemon, and look inside, what you see is what I presented or cut up earlier. What you actually see is segments. You see a sacred geometric pattern. You see micro segments within segments. There are vitamins, there's minerals, there's juice. There's so much in this. And if you just looked at it from the outside and thought it was peel, then you've really missed the point. And I think that's really true for astrology, because And I also think it was a bit of a cruel trick to help discredit astrology further. And that, I think the whole idea that astrology is the horoscopes, the 12 signs, I think that is one of the things that has been the main criticism. And I get it. I understand it. But there are a couple of other key criticisms that come up. And, I want to ask you, have you actually heard about the precession of the equinoxes? This is something that comes up on social media every couple of years or so. There'll be a bit of an astrological catfight between astrologers, and people will say, you're wrong because of the precession of the equinox. And you might have heard about it because essentially how we calculate the position of the star signs, it moves over the millennia. It moves about one degree every 72 years. So it moves really, really slowly. But if you consider that we've been recording this data since the Sumerian times, we've now actually accrued 24 degrees difference, since the beginning of our recording to now as a modern day astrologers. So we have two different systems of, I guess, timing and starting. And so the precession of the equinox I'm going to cover very shortly and actually give you you actually see it demonstrated in a live chart. But you might have also heard about the 13th sign. I'd love to know if you've heard about the 13th sign. That comes up on social media every now and again. So let's find out what this actually means to us. So to do that, we need to actually understand what a birth chart is. Like the horoscope is the peel, but the birth chart, which represents your actual sacred cosmic coding, is essentially a wheel, and it is made into sections, 12 sections. I don't know how many I've got there. 9, so it's not quite enough, but it's a wheel, and within that wheel we would plot the positions of all the planets within the solar system, and we would locate them at the exact time, place and date of your birth, and the positions of them within the wheel tell a story, and it's a huge narrative. Now, how do we do that? Well, essentially we take a snapshot of the sky. So if you were to lie on your back as a baby, look up at the sky, if you could see where the moon was, and if you could see the backdrop of the stars behind it, it would determine which star sign the moon was in when you were born. And the backdrop of the stars is really important because it's almost like a huge belt around the earth, far, far away in space. It's known as the ecliptic. And on the ecliptic are the 12 constellations that astrology refers to. So Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and all the way through to Pisces. Now, in the birth chart, the constellations have been very evenly divided into 12 equal parts. So apparently each constellation has a 30-degree space. But if you were to, and I did this 6 years ago and I was really shocked, but if you were to get your mobile phone and look up a planetarium app and one day hold your phone up to the sky to look where the moon is, you might come up against a bit of an error. So like I did, I was looking and I knew that from my tables using Western astrology that the moon was in Pisces. When I looked at my phone, what I saw from the planetarium was that the moon was actually showing in the constellation of Aquarius. Now, how can this be? And that is the problem with astrology nowadays, is that because the science has been split between astrology and astronomy, there aren't any astrologers anymore, or very few astrologers. There are hardly any astrologers that have any knowledge of astronomy. We don't need it. We are given fantastic tables. We don't even have to draw our charts out from start to finish because the computer does it for us. It's really easy. So we've lost touch with some of the nature of it. So what I'd like to do is have a look now at how the charts look in an actual birth chart. So I'm just going to go back to our video. 1 second. And it's just coming up now. It won't be a second. There we go. Okay, so this is a copy of my birth chart. So I've been talking about how a birth chart is made, and I've said it's a snapshot of the heavens on the time, place, and date of your birth. And essentially, if I'd looked up to the skies and if I could perceive the ecliptic, this is the ecliptic ring around the outside. This is essentially the backdrop of our heavens, which is the constellations of the fixed stars. We go from Aries to Taurus to Gemini to Cancer, all the way through. When I was born, if I'd looked up at the stars and if I could have seen it, I'd have seen that the moon was in the constellation of Pisces, as was Jupiter. My sun was in the sign of Sagittarius, my Venus in the sign of Capricorn, and so on and so forth. Now, I was talking about a different ecliptic. So some astrologers use a different sort of time and space continuum. And they are the ones that use the precessed equinox, the precession of the equinox. So what happens is in a precessed chart is that this ecliptic is shifted. Like right now in the tropical system, Scorpio is here at this very sensitive part. And I'm going to shift it to the sidereal in a moment, and you'll see the difference. Notice the pattern of my planets. Okay, so I've shifted it, and now my ascendant, this thing here, is in the sign of Libra. Scorpio has been shifted down. In fact, all of my planets are in the same position, but the backdrop against them has shifted. So if you remember, my moon was in the sign of Pisces. According to the sidereal system, my moon is actually really in the sign of Aquarius. But the relationship between the planets, the pattern, the internal cosmic coding is still the same, exactly the same. And if you remember, when I was talking at the start, I said that each constellation accounts for 30 degrees on this 360-degree birth wheel. In reality, Virgo is almost twice its size. And Aquarius is much bigger than 30 degrees. And Capricorn here would be much smaller. And so some astrologers actually use a different ecliptic around the outside. So, you know, they set that to an even more real and even more accurate ecliptic. However, what stays the same is the relationship and the pattern, the internal pattern between my planets at the time, place, and date of my birth. So my pattern stays the same, irrespective of what is going on with this wheel. And if you remember, there was also talk of the 13th star sign, of Fucus, to do with the 13th constellation. And that actually fits in between Scorpio and Sagittarius, and it would just be around here. And some of my planets, my Mars and Neptune, would be in the sign of Fucus. But again, it changes the outside wheel, but the condition of my planets stays the same. And so when I'm working with clients, I give them the choice of which system to work in, but the planets always stay the same. And actually, I use the tropical, the Western system, to represent our very physical, grounded life here on Earth. And I actually use the sidereal, a Fucus 13-degree system to show how we might awaken, because the backdrop of the chart itself almost describes our focus, our outer lens. This is really like the lens. So, you know, I can use this chart through the lens of the tropical view, and that's our very grounded, here I am, this is my life view. And then I can use the outer view of a Fucus, the 13th sign. And to me, that type of chart represents our cosmic potential. So I really like to do the ascension readings, which compare your grounded birth chart to your ascended birth chart. And if that's something that's interesting to you, then, you know, check it out on my website. Now, what I want to show you is how an astrologer can help you. So I'm back to the tropical view here, the original birth chart. Now this represents a static shot of my cosmic condition when I was born, and that I carry through life. These are my tendencies. It's almost like my cosmic DNA. Now, if I add in the transits, you'll see that there's the same symbols from the inside or on the outside, but they're all in different positions. That's because all the planets move at different speeds, and they've continued moving. This snapshot of my birth stays the same, but the planets keep on moving. And so when I'm working with clients, I'm comparing the condition of the current positions to the condition of my cosmic DNA, my cosmic coding. And so what I look for are a series of different things. The first thing is, are there any slow moving planets in a sensitive location? The slow moving planets are Uranus. Chiron isn't a planet, but I still include that. He's to do with healing and releasing childhood wounding. Neptune, to do with confusion and sort of not having boundaries. It's kind of very cotton woolish. Nothing's very clear with Neptune, and yet Neptune can really lead to enlightenment. And then there's Pluto, about yielding and giving away and rebirthing and resurrecting. Pluto's a really troubling planet to work with. We go through some very big shocks and deep internal transformations with Pluto. Now, when one of these moves over something sensitive like your sun or your moon, or one of these angles here, like this is to do with the home, this is to do with the relationships, this is to do with our career, and this is to do with our body. When one of these slow moving planets moves over these, it creates a very difficult tension for us. Now, in my late 20s, I had Pluto going over all of these. And so I had this really long drawn out time of ill health and mental adjustment to the world as it was against the world as I thought it should be. And it took a long time for me to sort of get over that and get over myself. And it's one of those times, you know, it took about 14 years for Pluto to go from here to there and for me to be free of it. It really took a long time. And so a lot of the time when people come to me, you know, if they give me their date of birth, you know, if they're Capricorn, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's why. And usually Pluto is right over their sun. But if it's not because they're a Capricorn calling me, it might just be that at their time, place, and date of birth, their moon, something very sensitive, was here, or their ascendant, to do with their body, was here. So there's usually a very clear reason why somebody might call. The same with Neptune and the same with Uranus. It's no surprise that in the last 2 years, I've had lots of people who are in particular Pisces and Capricorn, or with a strong Pisces and Capricorn component, contacting me, and to a lesser extent with Uranus in the sign of Taurus. But Uranus still brings up very big changes. You might notice actually Uranus is very close to here, and these planets appear to go forwards and then move backwards. It's called retrograde motion. And so they do this forwards backwards dance over these points, and it can take a few years for it to clear. So I've had some challenges over the last few years with relationships, nothing that I couldn't handle, but Uranus creates a level of instability and change. And so we have to really be aware of it and to work out what we want to mitigate and what we want to encourage. Something else I look out for are returns. Right now, my Jupiter return is coming up. Okay, Tanya, if I could be put back in. Okay, I'm back in. So I was just about to talk about returns. And actually, I want to move the conversation on because I want to talk about some of the other ways that astrology can show up, because we can clearly, that was to give you a depiction of how an astrologer can see difficult phases and different times coming up for you, and how you can plan it by looking at the direction and the placement of the outer planets against the pattern, the internal pattern in your chart. And if you remember, I was talking about, you know, what criticisms do people have of astrology? Oh, that they have different systems. But what I was showing you there was actually, irrespective of the backdrop of your birth chart, the core pattern, the core geometry, and the distance, the relative distance of the planets to each other at the time, place, and date of your birth, it stays the same. So you do have a resonance, and even astronomy and astrology would agree with that actual place. But I like to consider where in science these patterns are also reflecting, you know, where can we see them? And one of the things that really strikes me is financial analysts don't waste their time. Okay. So there's a whole heap of people that do financial, astrological, planetary trading. And I've got quite a few books here about it. And they share the patterns that come up. And I've tested these, and I have actually done some work with other people's stocks and shares astrologically. But this lovely book called The Lost Science, and notice it's called The Lost Science, implying what I was actually saying, that we already had this research and it got lost around the time when astrology and astronomy were separated. But M.G. Buchholz says in his introduction, "My research has led me to conclude that the forces of nature that exist in our cosmos are what influences our emotions. My quest to delve into these forces that drive emotion resulted in the publication of my first book, The Bull, the Bear, and the Planets. In this book, I introduce the reader to the basic tenets of how to use financial astrology as a tool to understand when emotion was likely to result in price trend changes." And so here's the thing. This book is essentially a list of all the research that has been done about the markets and the condition of the planets, and also some mathematical underlying elements. For instance, the number pi. Pi is really, really useful in looking at the sudden changes of the stock exchange. He also uses the golden frequency and the Fibonacci code, and also looks at numbers in sequences, because as the numbers in a certain resonance have a sequence, and as they increase, it tells him which stocks and shares are really a winner and which to really hold off on, because there are certain types of runs to be aware of. He also uses square roots and also fits into the astrological model. In his other book as well, somewhere around here, The Bull and the Bear and the Planets, he also talks about the quality of the moon. So not just what sign the moon is in, but in particular, full moons and new moons are very strong. If a company is formed at the time and does its first trade at the time of the full or new moon, then its stock itself is statistically more likely to be affected by new and full moons than any other moon time. And it's been studied over and over and over again. But again, it's something that's kept quite quiet. It's a real niche area of study. And also things like eclipses really, really like fall into it. In this book, Exploring the Financial Universe, Christine Skinner talks about the condition of the sun. So not just, what star sign the sun is in. So again, both of these are really dispelling the idea of the horoscope, with the 12 signs. They're really focusing on the quality of the planets, which is what I do in my practice. But she's making a real good case that sunspots, solar flares, the solar maximum and minimum, and the study of the quality of the sun and the quality of the moon really affects the mood of the world. And of course, when the mood of the world is calm, there's a very calm stock exchange. But if you can predict ahead of time that there's going to be a real fluctuation in mood, which nearly always happens when there's some very big solar events and also lunar events, and if there's also some planetary stuff backing it up, then these astrological traders know to watch that stock really carefully, and they're able to make an informed decision. She also, talks about the quality of the planet. So, for instance, house runs, like when there's a really good house market and when the house prices suddenly go up, it also correlates on a long-term study of a particular way of positioning Mars and asteroid Vesta, because they actually use asteroids as well because they are cosmic bodies. And so this is all part of a wealth of knowledge. But of course, if you throw astrology out because of the peel, because of the horoscopes, and say there's nothing in it, then it actually stops anyone finding out, is there something credible behind it? So there's that. I was also thinking, how would we know if there was, some correlations? Maybe we could study people that had the same birth chart, if they were born with the same birth chart, would they have the same life? And the closest we can come to that is with twins and twin studies. But of course, twins that grow up knowing each other are twins, they're going to be affecting each other's decisions. But there's been lots of studies done in twins that are separated at birth. In fact, there's a really famous one called the Jim twins, where two guys called Jim, funnily enough, they were separated, then both named Jim. They both married women, divorced them, married two more women, divorced them. Both of their wives had the same names. They both had a son. They both had the same car. They both had the same job. And their lives were really lived in a very strange and freaky kind of similarity. I once did a career chart for somebody, and I came back with my idea as to how she might enjoy her career. And her feedback was, that was great. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Funnily enough, you guessed the career of my twin sister. I had no idea she had a twin, but just goes to show that what was right for her was also right for her twin. If you think about the moon and the resonance of the moon, the moon represents it has an entanglement, a sort of quantum entanglement with marine life, with the tides, with the migration patterns of birds, with the spawning of coral that coincides with the full moon. This all comes together. Now, if the moon can influence us, who's to say that the other bodies within our spatial realm don't also have a level of influence? It reminds me of the music of the spheres, which was brought about by Pythagoras. It was his idea that you could almost feel the energy of the cosmos. And actually, when I look at a birth chart, what I really feel inside is that resonance. It almost feels like one of those cymatic, I don't know if you know those cymatic patterns where you have sand on a vibrational plate and you put a tone and the sand organizes itself into a beautiful sacred geometric pattern. That's what I see when I look at a birth chart. Here's a few correlations according to my personal life. So my husband has married two women. I'm the second one, and both of his wives, me included, we are both Sagittarians. We're born one day apart, although we have some years between us. We've both got our moon in Pisces. We've both got our Mercury in Sagittarius, and we've both got our Venus in Capricorn. Now, what are the chances that there are four different things that you should only have a 1 in 12 chance that you would have the same thing? We have a 1 in 12 chance with our sun, a 1 in 12 chance with our moon and Mercury and Venus. The chances of him finding another person with the same profile as his first wife is 1 in 20,730. I mean, it's a really, really remote thing. And yet, do you think that's chance? Is that chance? Or is there a kind of law of attraction going on whereby my husband has a preference, and by the sheer intention of him, he's brought about that intention has come into his life? Is that how it works? Who knows? When customers contact me, I have this resonance. So the last 4 people to join me in membership all have the same moon sign. Now, again, the chances of that are 1 in 20,000 that pattern repeats itself over and over again. It's bizarre, but my experience of astrology is that there is this unique pattern that codes us. And so when we were talking right at the start about, the church saying that at some level we are separating man from God by studying the planets, and it's something demonic. From my perspective, having used this my whole life and knowing my intention behind it, what I see is a reverence for the ultimate, beautiful, repeating cycles of life. We're part of life, and we can observe our role in the cosmos. It's almost like there is something really magical pulling us within our birth charts. I'm just so excited by it. So we're coming to the end of my presentation, and sadly, I didn't actually manage to bring about my planetary meditation, but I'm going to post it to my website. So if you'd like to have a go at that, I will post it on my website tonight for you to download and enjoy. That's an interesting. We got a question from Diane Wetherill. What about daylight saving time versus standard time? Which is correct? Which is the correct time for the chart? Well, again, that's a really good question. The astrological planets will automatically work it out to the real time, not the change time. So, you know, if we've got daylight savings, the computer will know that behind that is the real time, and it will attach to that. But effectively, I think it's more healthy to just look at the quality of your planets, Diane, because you'll get so much more quality information. On the subject of the signs, so again, you know, with the controversy of the 12 signs of the zodiac, I also believe that there is a resonance that is created by everybody when we all hold the same story about something builds, you know. So irrespective of whether my moon is in Pisces or actually in the sign of Aquarius, at some level that moon carries the Pisces resonance anyway. The Pisces story is kind of quantumly attached through everybody's agreement in it. So it's much of a muchness. At the end of the day, I think astrology is a fantastic tool to use you, to guide you through life, and to give you the opportunities to find freedom, really to find freedom and enjoy your life with as much beauty and grace as you can muster. And so if that helps anyone out there, I'd be absolutely thrilled. If you'd like to connect with me, you can just reach me. It's Louisa@feelgoodastrology.com. I've absolutely been delighted to come here and present to you today. So thank you so much for listening in. I'm absolutely bowled over. And it's great to see all the comments as well. If there was one last thing that I would like to draw you back to, which I said right at the start. I said, is there a time in your life where there are lots of celebrations going on? And the reason I asked that is because it's the very, very first kind of knock, knock, knock at the door to say, yes, there might be some pattern going on, because most people do have a busy time of the year because they have lots of friends that have a really similar experience. And so often we can notice our patterns really, really easily. So Paula Bravo is saying, if the moon influences the tides of the oceans, it means that we are influenced in our inner water. Absolutely. Yes. The elements, since we are made of 70% water, in this way, our emotions can be influenced by the moon. Definitely. Full moon influences many people in their emotional state. So if the moon influences a huge amount of water and oceans, there can also influence our inner water emotions. Absolutely, Paula, that is absolutely spot on. In fact, my observations also, I've noticed that people born at the time of the full moon and at the time of the new moon have a real extra sensitivity to the rest of the people, meaning that when there is a subsequent full moon or new moon, they are affected so much more. So yes, their coding is so much more, it's just so much stronger. I'm getting so many chills now. I'm getting all this feedback. It's lovely. Thank you so much, everybody. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm really happy to help with any other further questions. I think we're going to be in a private chat room later, aren't we, Tanya?
Yes, we are. We've been sharing on the chat the Zoom link. So whoever wants to join of the attendees, some of the speakers, whoever wants to join as well, will be at 5 o'clock when we end in a Zoom room where you can actually interact with each other. Thank you for mentioning that, Louisa.
Well, I just want to invite people to come and join us, you know, because I'd love to answer any further questions that people have. I'd love that.
Great. Ooh. Thank you very, very much. That was absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
And really, I feel that this last leg of this last bit, you, then William Linville, then Ricardo Diniz, is just to blow our minds out. It's just, whoa. Now, Ricardo's listening here. He's going to be 2 speakers from now. Okay, so let me just take it forward with our next speaker. Thank you, Louisa. See you in a short while.
See you in a short while. Bye for now.
Bye for now.